This Star Wars analysis will end the debate about the character of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. Says Esquire magazine. I find their lack of understanding to be disturbing. We'll break it down coming up. Here is another article that goes to defend Luke Skywalker in Last Jedi. And this article is based on a set of tweets that breaks down Luke's character in the end of Return of the Jedi and, compares it to The Last Jedi and says, well, it's he's the same person. This makes perfect sense. So I'm not going to read the article. I am going to go through the tweets. But the article, I'm just going to read one line just so you kind of know the, from where this comes. It says, there are those like myself who thought Rian Johnson made the most complex Star Wars movie to date, one that shows growth of beloved dynamic characters who face both triumphs and challenges. Then there are those who think the movies should have been populated by only hot white heroes with lots of abs doing manly things. Already, it's just so ridiculous. I'm not even gonna waste any more time on that, but I will go down here to the tweets. So, this was based on what the writer believes to be one of the best arguments that has gone to explain that Luke Skywalker in Return of the Jedi, who he was at the end of the movie, tracks perfectly with who he is in The Last Jedi. And the tweets are from a Jonathan McIntosh. And I'll link the article so you guys can read the whole article and then see the tweets as well. But Jonathan McIntosh, so he says, a handful of The Last Jedi haters in my mentions are offering up a fascinating misreading of the final showdown between Luke and Vader in Return of the Jedi. I think it's worth taking a moment to discuss because it may help explain why these guys hate Luke's character so much in Episode 8. The misreading: Luke Skywalker uses his great warrior skills to defeat Darth Vader. Once he's proven himself in combat and stands victorious, Luke does the honorable thing by showing mercy and sparing his enemy, thereby saving himself from corruption and redeeming his father. So that's what he's saying is this, big misunderstanding. And I don't know anyone who really has that. That's how they see, that whole last scene transpire. And then he says, what really happened? Luke tries to avoid fighting, but gives in to anger. He bests Vader in combat. Luke realizes his great mistake. Winning the fight means losing his soul to the dark side. The battle itself is corrupting him. Understanding this, Luke throws away his weapon. Now that is absolutely true. That's exactly how that last scene went. I don't disagree with him there. In fact, a lot of what he's saying is true. It's just he's missing something here. He says, notice that the misreading above reframes Luke as a badass warrior and reframes his refusal to kill Vader as an act of mercy stemming from a position of power. This is significant because Luke beating Vader in combat is explicitly depicted as a moment of weakness, not strength. And that is, that is true. That is how it is depicted. He fights Vader, he gives into his anger, and he stops himself, looks at his hand, his mechanical hand, and realizes, and then looks at Vader's chopped off mechanical hand, his mechanical stub, and realizes, I can't do this, I can't become my father. So, it says, he goes on to say, Luke's arc in the original trilogy ends with him not only refusing to kill the bad guy, but refusing to even fight a worse villain. This is why Luke's Force projection standoff with Kylo Ren in The Last Jedi is so perfect. It's the ultimate expression of everything Luke has learned. Here's where the problems arise, in my opinion, here with this article. So far, I agree with what he said, and then he says this, and it starts to contradict itself. The fact that he goes on, the fact that an iconic figure like Luke Skywalker was explicitly framed as weak for fighting a murderous villain like Vader is pretty subversive message, especially for a male hero in Hollywood, and it's something that 35 years later some fans refuse to accept. And then Rian Johnson replied to his tweets and said, "This illuminated something I found totally baffling. Thank you." And then and that's where this article ends. That's the tweets that this article is based upon, and that's the master breakdown of Luke Skywalker from Return of the Jedi to Last Jedi. The misunderstanding, I believe, here is that Luke. First of all, Luke isn't exactly a pacifist. Through the movie Return of the Jedi, he goes to Jabba and then tries to force pull a gun to point at Jabba to, I don't know, assumingly probably hold him hostage to let his friends go. If you want to say that Luke was intentionally trying to get caught because his whole master plan had to work out, more perfectly, I think that's a stretch. I think it's probably like they had plan A, B, C, and D, and they just kept going down the line. They hit contingency plans. But even if that were the case, then he still ends up on the barge by the Sarlacc pit and says, Jabba, this is your last chance, free us or die, which is a threatening statement. And then he, does his cool, awesome backflip somersault thing off of the boardwalk and catches his lightsaber and then starts slashing, the Jabba's guards, slashing them off and tossing them into the Sarlacc pit to be slowly digested for 1,000 years. So, he's not exactly a pacifist. In the confrontation with Vader, yes, he does not want to fight Vader. That's very true. He says that multiple times. I think in the middle of the fight when he's hiding underneath the stairs, he says, I will not fight you. And Vader says, well, if you won't fight me, you'll be destroyed. I can read your thoughts. Your thoughts go to your sister. If you won't turn to the dark side, she will. And then that's when he ignites his lightsaber and goes in to a fit, a rage, where the dark side starts, I think, coming in, consuming him a little bit there. And he takes Vader down and stops himself, realizes that he can't do this because he will lose himself to the dark side. That's all true. But it's not like that Luke's a pacifist. It's more that, it's his father. There's something more to stake there, being his father. He'd rather lose himself or risk his own life than to give in and to become his father. And he's also trying to, show Vader, I love you this much, I'd rather die. And that's what turns Vader against the Emperor. It's that he sees this kind of suffering when Luke's being shocked by the lightning, the Force lightning. He sees that kind of that emotion that Luke had, or that passion that Luke had in that self-sacrificial moment where Luke threw his lightsaber away and said, "I'm not, I'd rather die. I'm a Jedi." And so that's what helped Vader turn on his master and save Luke. So it brings us to Last Jedi. Last Jedi, if you're gonna say that's the same Luke, first of all, Luke attacked Vader in a fit of rage, in a moment of rage, because Vader was threatening his sister, and that was something Luke was not going to stand for. So it was a rage moment that came out. He goes up to Ben in his sleep, which is premeditated. There was no rage moment. There was nothing that caused Luke to instantly kind of turn into feel the dark side creeping on him, and he ignites his lightsaber. No, it was a more cool-minded, meditative premeditated maneuver. He goes in while Ben's sleeping, his back's to him, ignites his lightsaber, and is about to strike him down. That's totally different than what Luke did in Return of the Jedi with Vader. So that doesn't really make sense. And then you have the Force projection. And if saying that is the ultimate culmination of everything Luke has learned, in that he didn't want to fight, he's a pacifist, he didn't want to fight Ben, so he Force projected himself in the same way he didn't want to fight Vader. The problem with that is Luke had not been shown in The Last Jedi as having mastery over the Force. I mean, he had turned his back on the Force, he had disconnected himself from it. He was a curmudgeon the whole movie. He didn't want to help Rey. It was just totally opposite of the Jedi Master that you would expect to be able to do something like that. Now you could say, sure, he changed in the movie and he came back to that. Fine. But here's another issue, probably a deeper issue. Again, earlier in the movie, you show Luke as someone who was giving into his anger, rage, or fear, about to strike Ben down in his sleep, like he was about to strike Vader down in the in that final battle in Return of the Jedi. So that's saying Luke hasn't learned anything. He hasn't changed that much in 35 years. Now, most of the arguments that go to support Luke's character have been, oh, well, it's been 35 years. What, people don't change in 35 years? Yeah, of course, you're going to change in 35 years, so Luke just changed in 35 years. But now this master breakdown here is saying that, no, he hasn't changed in 35 years. He's the same old Luke. But then goes on to say that, but see, it's the ultimate combination of everything he's learned. He has changed in 35 years, because look at this. It's like you're saying two things. It's contradicting. It's a contradicting point of view. Well, first of all, that's saying that everything in the original trilogy doesn't matter because his character never changed, which is terrible. I mean, a whole character arc, writing of a character for a storyline, you learn something, you change, and you don't go back and make the same mistake, because that just diminishes everything you learned in the first place. So that's a deeper issue here. If you're saying that like Luke hasn't changed, well then that's terrible writing, because he shouldn't be going through the same issues he went through 35 years ago, during his true character arc. And also, like, Luke had been shown throughout the movie as very not caring, a curmudgeon. I want to stay out of this. I just want to stay here and die on this island. So that's the Luke we've been given. So for him to not really be there at the end tracks more with that Luke saying like, I haven't really cared this whole movie. Sure, I'll give a little effort. He has that talk with Yoda, and it kind of changes him a little bit. It's like, okay, I'll give a bit of an effort. I'll force project myself there. I don't really want to go there, so I'm just gonna force project myself there. That tracks more with that kind of Luke than like the Luke of Return of the Jedi, who, did go to see Vader face to face. So that's just some of my thoughts on this, this new article and these tweets that are trying to break down. I mean, I agree with him in some points, and I get what he's trying to say or where he's trying to, make the connections. I just think that these facts are, there's things that are missing there, and it kind of contradicts itself, or the character of Luke contradicts itself in The Last Jedi, if you're going to go with this kind of description of Luke and this breakdown. So what do you guys think of the article, or these tweets and this kind of breakdown of who Luke Skywalker was and who he is now? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you liked the video, give it the old thumbs up and subscribe to see more content. And until next time, lock the doors and hope they don't have blasters.